In the ashes of fallen empires, where East met West, a new power emerged, one that would shake the foundations of the known world, a dynasty born from the dreams of a warrior, forged in fire and ambition, destined to rule for 6 centuries. This is the story of the Ottoman Empire. The year is 1299. The once mighty Seljuk Sultanate has crumbled, and the Byzantine Empire, though still standing, is a shadow of its former glory. Amidst this chaos, a young Turkic warlord named Osman rises from the rugged hills of Anatolia. His name would echo through history. Osman I, the founder of an empire. But how did a minor tribal leader lay the foundations for one of history's greatest empires? The answer lies in ambition, opportunity, and a vision that stretched beyond the horizon. Osman's followers, the Ghazis, warriors fighting in the name of Islam, saw him not just as a leader, but as a conqueror chosen by destiny. With each victory, Osman's territory grew. The Byzantines, weakened by internal strife, could not stop him. By the time of his death in 1326, his son Orhan would capture the city of Bursa, transforming it into the first true Ottoman capital. Orhan did not merely inherit land, he inherited a vision. He expanded into Europe, crossing the Dardanelles and setting foot on the continent that would one day tremble before the Ottomans. But it was under Murad III that the empire truly began to take shape. At Kosovo Field, the Ottomans faced a coalition of Balkan forces. The battle was brutal, bloody. Murad himself was slain, but in death he secured victory. The Balkans fell, and the Ottomans were no longer just another kingdom. They were an empire. Yet this was only the beginning. The Ottomans were rising, but their greatest test and their greatest triumph was yet to come. A city of legends, a fortress deemed unconquerable, Constantinople. For 1,000 years, the walls of Constantinople had stood unbroken. Empires had risen and fallen. Armies had shattered against its mighty defenses. But now, in the year 1453, the last jewel of Rome faced its greatest threat. A young, ambitious sultan stood outside its gates, his cannons poised to rewrite history. Mehmed II was only 21 years old, but his dream was ancient, to conquer what no Muslim ruler had ever taken. Constantinople was more than a city, it was a symbol, and Mehmed would either claim it or die trying. The Byzantines, led by Emperor Constantine XI, knew this was their final stand. Their empire had been reduced to little more than the city itself, its population dwindling, its glory fading. Yet they would fight, not for victory, but for honor. Inside the great Hagia Sophia, whispers of doom filled the air. Some believed the end had come, that prophecies of the city's fall were finally being fulfilled. Others clung to hope, praying for a miracle that would never arrive. On April 6, 1453, the bombardment began. The earth itself trembled as Mehmed's monstrous cannons, designed by the Hungarian engineer Orban, pounded the walls day and night. But Constantinople would not fall easily. For weeks, the defenders held. They fought with the desperation of men who had nothing left to lose. But Mehmed was relentless. When the walls would not break, he turned to cunning, dragging his ships over land to bypass the great chain blocking the Golden Horn. The Byzantines awoke to a nightmare. The unthinkable had been done. The Ottomans were inside their defenses. As dawn broke, the final attack came. The Janissaries, Mehmed's elite warriors, stormed the shattered walls. Constantine, the last Roman emperor, drew his sword and vanished into the chaos, his body never found. By midday, the city was lost. Mehmed entered Hagia Sophia, knelt in prayer, and declared it his own. Rome had fallen. A new empire now ruled from Constantinople, or as the Ottomans would call it, Istanbul. With the fall of Constantinople, the Ottoman Empire was no longer just a rising power. It was the dominant force of the age. But empires, like all things, must one day face their reckoning. From the ashes of Constantinople rose something extraordinary, an empire that stretched across 3 continents, commanding the loyalty of millions. This was the Ottoman world at its zenith, where sultans wielded power like gods, and Istanbul stood as the beating heart of civilization itself. No ruler embodied Ottoman glory more than Suleiman. To his people, he was the lawgiver. To Europe, he was the magnificent, a poet, a warrior, a visionary. His reign would become the empire's golden age. Under Suleiman, the empire reached its farthest extent. Belgrade fell, Rhodes surrendered, his armies pushed to the gates of Vienna, sending shockwaves through Christendom. The Mediterranean became an Ottoman lake, ruled by admirals like the fierce Barbarossa. But Suleiman's legacy legacy wasn't just conquest. He built monuments that defied time, mosques, bridges, libraries. He reformed laws with such fairness that they endured for centuries. And yet, even at its height, the seeds of decline were being sown. For in the very halls of power, a deadly game had begun, one that would slowly strangle the empire from within. The harem, once simply the sultan's private quarters, it had become a viper's nest of intrigue. Favorites schemed, mothers fought for their sons' futures, grand viziers rose and fell like the tide, and with each passing sultan, the throne grew heavier to bear. Women like Roxolana wielded power no queen had before, but at what cost? As the sultans retreated into luxury, the empire's warriors grew complacent. The Janissaries, once the fiercest fighters in the world, became kingmakers, demanding more, giving less. While the Ottomans turned inward, the world was changing. New trade routes bypassed their lands. European cannons grew louder, their ships faster, and in the east, an ancient rival watched and waited. The Safavids of Persia struck at the empire's heart, draining its strength in endless wars. Meanwhile, in the Mediterranean, a shocking defeat at Lepanto revealed the unthinkable. The Ottomans could be beaten. The Golden Age was ending, and as the 17th century dawned, the empire would face challenges no sultan could ignore. Every empire carries within it the poison of its own decay. For the Ottomans, the 17th century brought a cruel revelation. They were no longer the unstoppable force of Suleiman's age. The world was moving forward, while Constantinople looked backward. The Janissaries, once the empire's razor edge, had become its tumor. They deposed sultans at will, murdered reformers, and strangled progress, all to protect their privileges. When Osman II tried to break their power in 1622, they strangled him with his own bowstring. While Europe raced through the scientific revolution, Ottoman scholars debated whether the printing press was haram. While New World silver flooded markets, the empire clung to debased coinage. The gap widened with each passing year. The final warning came at Vienna, the largest army the Ottomans had ever assembled. 200,000 men shattered against Poland's winged cavalry. For the first time, Christendom drove them back, not just defeated, humiliated. At Karlowitz in 1699, the empire did something unimaginable a century before. It permanently surrendered territory in a peace treaty. The sick man of Europe had taken his first stumbling step. Reform attempts became tragic farce. When Selim III created a modern Nizami Chedid army, the Janissaries burned his reforms, and him alive. Mahmud II waited 30 years for revenge, then massacred them all in a single bloody day. But it was too late. The cancer had metastasized. One by one, the provinces slipped away. Greece, Serbia, Algeria, each loss carved another piece from the rotting carcass. By 1853, even the Tsar dared call the Sultan a dying man. The ultimate indignity? Surviving only because European powers needed a buffer against each other. The empire had become a chess piece in others' games. Even now, flickers of defiance remained. Idealists pushed parliaments and railroads across the empire, but when Abdul Hamid II tore up the constitution and plunged the empire back into tyranny, he signed its death warrant. The 20th century would not tolerate such empires, and the Ottomans, shriveled, hated, bleeding, would meet their end in the furnace of world war. The year is 1914. An empire that once dictated terms to kings now shuffles nervously behind Germany and Austria in the march to war. The Ottomans are breathing, but barely, and the world is about to administer the final blow. In a desperate bid for relevance, the Young Turk regime makes its fatal choice, allying with the Kaiser. 2 German ships, renamed as Ottoman vessels, will shell Russian ports. The empire stumbles blindly into the First World War. For a fleeting moment, the old spirit flickers back to life. At Gallipoli, a young colonel named Mustafa Kemal holds the cliffs with a ferocity that would make Suleiman proud. The empire wins its last great victory, and still loses the war. The Middle East explodes in betrayal and blood. The British promise Arabs independence while secretly dividing the land with France. Armenians perish in the killing fields. After 6 centuries, the empire is being skinned alive. This is how an empire ends. Not with a bang, but with a signature. The Sultan, God's shadow on earth, reduced to a prisoner in his own palace, signing away his birthright to foreign diplomats. But from the ashes, something new stirs. A hard, brilliant soldier who refuses to kneel. While While Istanbul grovels, Kemal forges a republic in Anatolia's heartland. His ultimatum is merciless. The Sultanate is abolished. The Ottomans are finished. And so, on a damp autumn morning, the final sultan steps onto a steamer bound for exile. No fanfare, no mourners, just the gulls crying over the water as Constantinople, no, Istanbul, recedes behind him. The empire is gone, but its shadow lingers in the curve of a mosque's dome, in the swirl of Turkish coffee, in the DNA of 3 continents. The Ottomans ruled for 623 years. They fell in less than 23. Such is the way of empires. They believe themselves eternal until suddenly they aren't. And with that, the past folds itself away once more. Subscribe to The Past Unfolded for more journeys into history's forgotten corners. Thank you.